My name is Kylie Doyle, and I will be discussing Chapter 6 from the book Good to Great by Jim Collins, A Culture of Discipline. There are many times that Chapter 6 refers to the hedgehog concept, which was discussed in Chapter 5. In order to understand many of the things that Chapter 6 discusses, we need to understand the story about the fox and the hedgehog. The fox is a cunning creature. He is able to strategize and perform sneak attacks upon the hedgehog. Day in and day out, the foxes pounce. They're fast, they're sleek, they're beautiful, and they're crafty. The fox looks like a sure winner. The hedgehog, on the other hand, is a dowdier creature, looking like the genetic mix-up between a porcupine and a small armadillo. The fox waits in cunning silence to pounce on the hedgehog. The hedgehog, minding his own business, wanders into the right path of the fox. "I've got you now," thinks the fox, and he leaps, bounding across, lightning fast. The little hedgehog, sensing danger, looks up and thinks, "Here we go again. Will he ever learn?" and rolls up into a perfect little ball. The hedgehog becomes a sphere of sharp spines. The fox knows many things, but the hedgehog knows one big thing. There is also a diagram of the 3 circles of the hedgehog concept. They are: what are you deeply passionate about, what you can be the best in the world at, and what drives your economic engine. The central idea in Chapter 6 is to build a culture full of people who take disciplined actions within the 3 circles, fanatically consistent with the hedgehog concept. Very few startup companies become great, in large part because they respond to growth and success in the wrong way. They begin to trip over their own success. Too many people, too many new customers, too many new orders, and so on. They oftentimes hire seasoned executives, and what was once an egalitarian environment gets replaced with a hierarchy. What was once us becomes we and they. Hiring the right people in a good to great company is crucial. The purpose of bureaucracy is to accommodate for the incompetence and lack of discipline. This problem will disappear if you have the right people on the bus. Most companies build their bureaucratic rules to manage the small percentage of wrong people on the bus, which in turn drives away the right people on the bus, which then increases the percentage of wrong people on the bus, which increases the need for more bureaucracy. This becomes a vicious cycle. We need to avoid bureaucracy and hierarchy and instead create a culture of discipline. Creating a culture of discipline also involves setting the correct objectives. When you set your objectives for the year, they should be concrete. You may change your plans throughout the year, but you should never change your objectives and what you measure yourself against. At the end of the year, you should focus on what you accomplished relative to what you said you were going to accomplish. Good to great companies employ leaders and give those leaders freedom to decide on the best path to achieve the objectives set before them. They build a culture around the idea of freedom and responsibility, but freedom within a framework. They hired self-disciplined people who don't need to be managed and managed the system, not the people. We see 2 examples of good to great companies who maintained a culture of discipline in Chapter 6. They are Wells Fargo and Nucor. I like this quote displayed in Chapter 6. "Everyone would like to be the best, but most organizations lack the discipline to figure out with egoless clarity what they can be the best at and the will to do whatever it takes to turn that potential into reality." We see the executive Reichert of Wells Fargo with this quote, "We're not going to ask everyone else to suffer while we sit on high." He did things such as froze executive salaries for 2 years, shut the executive dining room and replaced it with college dorm food service center. He closed the executive elevator and sold corporate jets. He also banned green plants from the executive suite because they were too expensive to water. We see the same kind of sacrifices in the leaders of Nucor. In fact, Sometimes the frontline workers received better benefits than the executives did. A stop doing list. Many companies have a to-do list. They should also have a stop doing list. This shows strong discipline and a way to get rid of all the junk. Once you know the right thing, the question is, do you have the discipline to do the right thing? And just as important, to stop doing the wrong thing. How does a culture of discipline apply to leadership theories? For this presentation, we will look at the leadership theories and beliefs of Henry Fayol, Elton Mayo, the Ohio State Study, and Douglas McGregor. How does Henry Fayol relate to a culture of discipline? Fayol believed in the operational management style. He outlined 14 principles of management, number 3 being discipline. The workers should be obedient and respectful of the organization. Now let's take a look at Elton Mayo and how his theories relate to a culture of discipline. Mayo believed in the human relations approach. He participated in studies called the Hawthorne studies. There were 3 different ones that were performed, called the illumination study, the relay assembly test room, and the bank wiring test room. These were to test to see if things such as lighting in the room, how many breaks a worker received during the day, and how well fed the workers were had any indication of how well they would perform their job. His major findings are that when workers feel important or valued, he or she will work harder. Physical incentives, such as pay, how well they're fed, or how many breaks they receive during the day, have little or no motivational value to an employee. Workers will establish a group norm. If you overperform or underperform, you are considered an outcast. Workers change their behavior when they know they are being watched. And employees who feel they are valued or they're part of a team and they work with people that they get along with will be more productive. The Ohio State study looked at 2 important factors of leaders. One was consideration, that is, how friendly they are, how approachable they are, and how concerned they are with the welfare of the group. And initiating structure. This is letting the group know what is expected of them and maintaining a standard of performance. We learned that when a high initiating structure is present, employees are more likely to have discipline and to do what is expected of them. The last theorist that we're going to look at today is Douglas McGregor. He believed there were 2 different management perspectives, Theory X and Theory Y. Theory X managers believe that the average person dislikes work and will avoid it if at all possible. They're very authoritarian, they have tight control over their employees, and usually that work environment is a depressed culture. Theory Y managers, whom I believe help develop a culture of discipline, believe that work is just as effortless as play and rest. Those managers help their employees seek responsibility and that the employers have a commitment to the objectives of the job set before them. Let's take a look at how a culture of discipline applies to our school settings. Teachers who possess effective discipline in the classroom are more likely to have students who are self-disciplined. Teachers should try to help students learn how to be self-disciplined by letting them know exactly what is expected of them and teaching classroom routines over and over again. I'm reminded of several examples of teachers who had taught their students self-discipline from the book The First Days of School by Harry Wong. This is an excerpt from one elementary teacher, Sue Flynn. I'm a single parent and it's sometimes difficult to leave for work on a schedule, but I was on time. Alas, my good fortune was not to continue because traffic came to a halt on the freeway due to an accident. As I sat in my car waiting to resume my commute, I tried to imagine what the scene in my classroom would be. I could not call to let anyone know that I would be late. What would 25 unsupervised 5th graders do? What would I find upon my arrival? Would the gym teacher be annoyed because we were all going to be late for gym? What I found in my classroom was a beautiful reward for 20 years of loving students and striving to make them responsible and self-sufficient. To my amazement, I found an empty classroom and the following note left on my desk. Dear Mrs. Flynn, we took the attendance, did the lunch count, completed our morning math warm-ups, and went to gym. Love your class. I cannot agree with you more on the importance of clearly defined procedures and routines. My students are proof of this. Administrators, teachers, and staff. Earlier in this presentation, we learned how the good to great companies have the right people working for them. The same is true for a school environment. It's important that a principal hires teachers and staff who are self-motivated and self-disciplined. If this is the case, then that principal will be able to relinquish much responsibility to those teachers and staff. Also, there will be no need to micromanage. When the right teachers are present, they will be self-disciplined. As school leaders, developing a culture of discipline will require modeling disciplined thought and disciplined action. One of Merriam-Webster's definitions of discipline is training that corrects, molds, or perfects the mental faculties or moral character. The Latin origin disciplina means instruction given, teaching, learning, knowledge. The Latin origin for disciple, discipulus, means pupil, student, and follower. The word disciple and discipline come from the same Latin root word. The key to creating a culture of discipline in a school setting will be using the principles of discipleship. We need to create followers by teaching, training, and empowering them to disciple others.